Thanks, Todd. It's great to be here with you.
Richard, your quest for the truth about 9/11 has indeed been unyielding. You've given hundreds of presentations to architects and engineers, to the public, all over the world. Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth has grown into a powerhouse by 9/11 Truth organizational standards, with over 1,300 credentialed architects and engineers who have signed a petition calling for a new investigation of 9/11, and who have successfully, to this point, forced NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, to correct some of its false claims in reports that it's issued attempting to explain the disintegrations of the buildings at the World Trade Center. Your organization has held high-profile press conferences around the country, and it's such a remarkable organization. I was just hoping you could tell us a little bit about how you created it and how you built it into the highly effective organization it is today. It took a lot of work, didn't it?
I can agree with that statement. Yes, it certainly did. We started 4 years ago. I'm an architect of 20 years, and I had a normal, if you will, architecture job, and I was on my way to one of our construction meetings, and I heard David Ray Griffin on the radio, and it just floored me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. An alternative theory as to how these 3 World Trade Center high-rises came down in just seconds. We can get into the evidence for that later, but to answer your question,
right.
There was nobody else talking about this. So the last 4 years, I just realized that I had to do something. I had no choice. It didn't seem like there was any choice in the matter. My life has changed radically, and I stepped forward. I talked to a few of my friends. They thought I was nuts, so I spent a little more time in research, put together Stephen Jones's PowerPoint, and added some more slides to it. Took it to the firm I worked for at the time, 15 of them. In the presentation, they were forced. The evidence was real. After having, for the last couple of months before that, thought that I was nuts. They agreed with me after the presentation, all of them, and 14 out of 15 signed the petition calling for a new investigation of the destruction of these 3 high-rises. So we were on our way, and that was 4 years ago now. We have, as you suggested, over 1,377 or something right like that today.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you traveled to architecture firms around the country and made presentations, and how did you bring in the engineers as well as the architects?
Well, we don't discriminate. We'll go anywhere we're allowed in. I'm in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, and we call architecture and engineering firms. We go in and we buy them lunch, and we feed them the evidence. And they then realize that there's something up. Before this, they're either curious, 1 or 2 out of 10 may be already aware of this evidence. The rest are curious or think that we've gone off the deep end. But everybody gets it. In fact, we do a show of hands everywhere we go, 17 foreign countries and 30 American cities, as you suggested. That's almost altogether to 200 presentations. We have agreement that, yes, these are controlled demolitions. From those who come in suspicious of our motives or information, 90% or so of them really get it, and many of those sign our petition.
Well, it's a fantastic tactic that you've taken. It's been incredibly effective. And just recently, this is very exciting. A representative of architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, Tony Zambotti, was, along with Bob McIlvaine of the Building What campaign, was on the Geraldo Rivera TV program on Fox News, and was able to give all kinds of information that on national TV about the demolition of WTC 7. And this was remarkable. We're very excited about this. Before we get into the scientific evidence for the demolition of the buildings today, could you just give us talk for a minute about this amazing breakthrough? What do you think the significance of this Fox News coverage of Building 7's demolition is? Were you as surprised as we were?
Sure. We have not had a major mainstream media breakthrough, and I consider showing the rapid free-fall destruction of Building 7 as a breakthrough.
I agree.
In the mainstream media, for years. So I don't. So they have clearly censored this topic of 9/11 Truth, and particularly the destruction of these buildings, which has never happened before in history due to fire. But I don't know how. I know how it happened. We have a massive campaign to show Building 7 to 9 million New Yorkers in an ad where the family members worked very hard to produce and show this film, this 30-second ad campaign, where 4 of the family members are calling for a new investigation of Building 7. So a lot of people became aware of it. Geraldo was one of them, and so onto his show and showed the TV ad right then and there, and had the family member Bob McIlvaine and Tony Zambotti, who is an engineer with AE 9/11 Truth, present the fact that a building can't fall at free fall speed and do any other work, such as crushing the 40,000 tons of structural steel in it. So all of that made it onto mainstream media, and as far as, so it's significant, in fact, that it's a breakthrough. What we don't know is what will happen as a result. We did have Judge Napolitano from Fox invite Geraldo on his show and say, hey, what's up with this? And Geraldo says, well, it looks like a controlled demolition to me. And Judge Napolitano later on made the comment that it did to him too. So something's going on. We don't know if it's some part of an effort to, provide maybe some sort of debunking later on, or if this is a genuine, sincere effort somehow on Geraldo's part to reveal the truth. Although if he was really going to do that, one would have thought that he would name the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, show our website up there, show some of our evidence to support Tony Zambotti's analysis, which was only 5 minutes long. I mean, let's do some in-depth reporting here if you're gonna do it. But there's been no follow-up yet.
Right. Well, obviously, he had a limited amount of time, but he should definitely do some more programming on this subject if he's serious and sincere about it. But it can only have been positive, I think, for that to have happened, and I think there's been some ripple outward into other mainstream. I think CNN has run story about the event, and so it seems to be having some kind of a ripple effect as well, which can only be positive, I think.
Yes, and I haven't seen the CNN story, so I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. Architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth has been in the forefront of this effort to bring out the truth about the building's disintegrations. The term collapse isn't exactly accurate.
And of course, WTC7 has been such a classic case with the video footage of what looks exactly like controlled demolition. NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, took its time producing its official report, its final report on WTC7, and what it purports is an explanation of what happened. But people like you have analyzed, your organization has analyzed the NIST report, and it's clear that NIST has put out a rather large number of falsehoods, shall we say, to put it mildly. What is NIST's claim for how WTC7 collapsed like that?
Well, NIST, first of all, acknowledges that the steel members flung from the North Tower which struck the World Trade Center 7. There's some minor damage to the building. They acknowledge that is not a significant factor. They acknowledge that the diesel fuel, which fueled generators in the building, was not a factor at all. There was no diesel fuel fires, and these are two of the main reasons that popular mechanics, for instance, used as fuel, if you will, against the 9/11 Truth Movement's evidence for the destruction of Building 7 as being a controlled demolition. So what do they say? They say that large office fires, normal office fires, brought this building down due to the failure of a single column in the manner in which it came down. So, first of all, the photos and videos show only small scattered office fires. So that's strike one against this theory. Strike two, the photos and videos, they also show that those fires were out in the area of the initiation of collapse on floor 12 up to an hour before the collapse at 5:20 in the afternoon. So that pulls the rug out from the official story there. In addition, they say there was this massive fire on this floor, which caused the heating up of these long span beams, which couldn't have happened because these beams are fireproofed, first of all. They're also tied integrally with shear studs to the composite concrete metal decking floor system above it. So that pulls the rug out from underneath their story. What they had to do in their computer model to prove this was true is to heat those beams up within a second so that they would have longitudinal expansion shearing those shear studs, and not heat the concrete floor up so that those shear studs with the pins which tied the beams to the floor would fail. So this is just the beginning of a fantastic story that they have to manipulate all the input data in their computer model in order to try to demonstrate, and yet they won't release the input data in that computer model despite FOIA requests, and they cite that it would jeopardize public safety were they to release this information, which is ludicrous, of course. But going on, these floor beams expand, and theoretically they push this girder off of its seat on column 79. Well, first of all, I mean, in addition, it could not have pushed this girder off of its seat because the girder is tied with shear studs into the floor system above it as well, and also that seat is a 13-inch ledge, and the expansion was only something like 3 or 4 inches. So the whole thing makes no sense. But let's say that it did. It pushed it off of its seat. They're saying then that would have caused the floor failure of 13 onto 12. there wouldn't have been such a floor failure. It would have required a progressive chain of failure to the next beam, but there's no evidence or demonstration provided that that even could have happened, and it wouldn't. Steel frame systems, structural systems are extremely redundant. But even had it, they're saying that that weight caused the next floor to fail, and the next one down to 9 floors. And again, the redundancy would have kept that from happening. But even if that did happen, then they're saying that this instability traveled laterally and vertically in just 10 seconds. And again, in a steel frame redundant system like this, this is just ludicrous. Structural engineers roll their eyes about when they hear this. And they didn't know about this. And remember, this report came out 7 years after 9/11. No one wanted to look back 7 years later and examine this report. So structural engineers, fire protection engineers, don't even know about Building 7 at all, largely, when we bring it to their attention. And then they see immediately that this couldn't have happened. But even if there was this internal cascading failure in the 10 seconds prior to the collapse of World Trade Center 7, such internal failure would have caused massive warping of the external perimeter, because as these floors failed, they would have pulled in on the external structural steel frame, and you would have seen all this warping. And indeed, in their own computer models, that's what they show. I mean, but the video doesn't show that at all. The video shows a straight down, symmetrical collapse, and as if the knees were kicked out from under it, as if there were explosives placed on all the columns at once, within a fraction of a second of each other is what's required. Otherwise, this building would have had to have tipped over. So it also, you have the videos reveal that the central penthouse drops a second prior to the overall building collapse. That indicates structural failure in the core columns, and all of them at once. That's not the way a building would collapse, were there any kind of a progressive failure, which would have been a more random, chaotic, large moaning, groaning of the building, and the twisting, the toppling, asymmetrical, gradual collapses here and there. And that's anything but what is seen.
Yeah, the videos. I mean, the most distinctive thing about the videos is that they show this sudden, fast, straight down collapse, so that it looks exactly like every other controlled demolition that folks have seen on innumerable TV programs of other buildings being demolished, and that's exactly what WT7C7 looks like. So isn't there all kinds of evidence, physical evidence, based upon photos and videos, and also physical evidence that the building was indeed demolished, which NIST has not taken into account or has somehow distorted? What kinds of evidence, positive evidence for demolition, is there?
Well, NIST, first of all, should have looked at the hypothesis of controlled demolition the most first, and with great seriousness. But it dismissed at hand, even though controlled demolition has been the only way that skyscrapers have collapsed in this manner, and since it looked exactly like an explosive controlled demolition. They seem to have gone straight for the fire collapse theory. And by the way, and since there were many, many witnesses of explosions at the onset of the destruction of this building, and hearing explosions and even feeling the ground rumbling in the case of first responder Air Force medic Kevin McPadden, and who even heard a countdown and testified to this, a witness to this, and hearing those explosions after the countdown. Craig Bartmer, New York Police Department whistleblower, hears explosions and is running from the building as as he's experiencing this debris falling on him. So that's just part of the evidence. But the video evidence reveals, particularly in a very careful analysis by physics teacher David Chandler, who documents that this building falls as fast as a bowling ball falling off the top of it. In other words, the bowling ball has no resistance. It falls at free fall acceleration. The building does the same thing for the first 100 feet of its fall. And now NIST originally denied this, and they said if the building was falling at free fall, that would mean there'd be no structure underneath. Exactly. But being forced into a corner by David Chandler, Stephen Jones, and other petition signers of 9/11 Truth, NIST, have to acknowledge months later that you're right, it did fall at free fall. But then they do not acknowledge the implications of that, which is that the structure had to have been removed. Now, that can only be done explosively, because those columns have to be removed within 1/10 of a second of each other. The core columns at a minimum, and probably the perimeter columns as well, 80 columns or so altogether. This is the work of a half a dozen highly trained companies in the world, is all who are capable of accomplishing this, and they do it with explosives. Now, in the case of Building 7, if one was going to do a deceptive controlled demolition, one would probably not use the high-energy explosives such as C4 and RDX, which produce loud bangs and bright flashes. One would look for an alternative method, such as an incendiary, thermite, which has patented devices designed for its use as cutter charges. And we document all this very carefully in our 2-hour research edition of the 9/11 Blueprint for Truth DVD. And that can be seen on our website, which is ae911truth.org. That's ae911truth.org. And we're very careful to document not only that these patented devices exist, but that there's the evidence left in the debris in Building 7 of several tons of molten metal flowing like lava, the first responders say. And it's documented by structural engineers as well. Even FEMA documents the melting of steel. In the one piece of steel that was saved from this building, by the way, the rest of this steel having been illegally destroyed, carted away on a barge to China for recycling, even before the report came out in May of 2002, which cited that their best hypothesis, FEMA's best hypothesis as to how this building came down, which is fire and random damage from the debris from World Trade Center North Tower, has only a low probability of occurrence. In other words, fire probably didn't bring this building down. And they say further research analysis are necessary in order to resolve this issue. But by the time the report came out, all the steel had been destroyed, so they couldn't even look to the steel, which is normally laid out very carefully in structural failures, to determine how a building came down. So this is part of the cover-up, the illegal destruction of evidence. But in their Appendix C, FEMA documents very carefully this one piece of steel that was saved. They document intergranular melting. Now, mind you, steel doesn't melt in office fires. It doesn't. Even jet fuel can't melt steel. Melted steel requires almost 3,000 degrees, and yet these office fires are not even half that temperature. So where did the heat come from to melt the steel? Well, they also document in building in the Appendix C the rapid oxidation and sulfidation of this steel. It looked like Swiss cheese. The sulfur is added to thermite, and it becomes thermate. It lowers the melting point of steel. So thermite is an incendiary used by the military to cut through steel like a hot knife through butter. It is very effective, and especially with sulfur added to it. So it produces molten iron as its byproduct. So this adds to the credibility of the hypothesis for explosive controlled demolition by thermite, because that's what the first responders see, is several tons of molten iron. Well, it turns out when that molten iron is analyzed by Stephen Jones with electron microprobe data, he finds that it is indeed iron. It's not some other molten metal. He finds that it has in it the evidence of thermite, including manganese, aluminum, etc., in addition to the molten iron. So all of this evidence is very damning to the official story, which says that Building 7 came down due to normal office fires.
Well, it seems like they're just creating a fantasy, a fable, and covering up vast amounts of evidence. I think that this kind of performance by a scientific agency such as NIST is criminal. It would seem to me. They're supposed to be using the best scientific methods. I know that there's a national fire investigation authority. I don't remember the exact name of it, but there are standards for investigations where if there's even just high-level damage, intense damage that raises suspicions of explosions, investigators are supposed to look for evidence of explosives, are they not?
Oh, yeah. This is NFPA 921, National Fire Protection Association Manual. And
that's it.
This is a requirement of these guidelines that all fire departments use. High order damage is evident in the Twin Towers because of the complete destruction down to individual structural members. The lateral ejection of 9-ton perimeter wall units, for instance, instantly ejected out of the side of the Twin Towers at 60 to 70 to 80 miles an hour, landing up to 600 feet away. This is an example of high-order damage. The complete pulverization of 90,000 tons of concrete floors in these buildings in midair. This is an example of high-order damage, and this is to a powder like talcum powder, which lands throughout lower Manhattan in an even blanket like snow. 30% of this powder is documented to be concrete. And by the way, 6%, up to 6% in the case of the Deutsche Bank building samples taken by R.J. Lee, an environmental firm, find 6% of this powder is small, previously molten iron microspheres. And now, what in the heck are those, and how did they get there? USGS, U.S. Geological Survey, finds them in every sampling. So these microspheres actually are used as a defining signature element of the dust by these agencies and this firm.
That's an astonishingly high percentage as well, isn't it?
Oh, it's incredible. Where did several tons of previously molten iron microspheres come from? Well, they're about the size of the diameter of a human hair. First of all, they're found up on top of the Deutsche Bank building. They have in them, according to chemical analysis done by many, in addition to being predominantly iron, it's not melted steel, by the way, because this is pure elemental iron with traces of aluminum in it and manganese. and other signature components of the byproducts of what? Thermite. Again, thermite being the incendiary used by the military to cut through steel like a hot knife through butter. Well, how would they become spherical? Well, if you had thousands of cutter charges laced throughout the columns and beams in the World Trade Center Twin Towers, under explosive conditions, you would have the dispersal of liquid molten iron being the byproduct of thermite. And when, like in a spray bottle, you disperse a liquid, it produces tens of thousands of droplets. These are spherical in shape due to the surface tension in airborne aerosolized liquid. So then this liquid molten iron would cool and fall with all of the World Trade Center dust everywhere. And that is the only rational explanation for all of these billions of samples, billions of spheres in all the dust samples taken by everyone. They come back and say, the official story, NIST says, oh, these must have been from the cleanup operations. That's ludicrous.
Right.
Some of these samples are collected just 10 minutes after the collapse of the building.
Yeah, Kevin Ryan a couple of weeks ago on our show talked a remarkably high level of expertise in nanothermite, involvement in the development of nanothermite and the applications of those kind of materials, of high-level people at NIST, scientists at NIST, even the director, two or three directors of NIST over the last 10 years have part of their career, their professional careers have been involved with nanothermites, and yet, they don't even have a look to see if there's anything like nanothermite in there. These are experts in the residues of nanothermite explosions. So, it's very clear that a decision was made to avoid the actual evidence.
Well, there's a reason for that. Let me go into that, because this is extremely important. There's a reason that these experts are avoiding nanothermite, because this small team of scientists led by Niels Harrit from Copenhagen found in the dust all the dust samples that they tested, and 4 separate samples in this case had hundreds of these small, curious red-gray chips in them. They come up to the magnet. Why? Because they have iron in them. What is iron? It's one of the 2 chief components of thermite. More interestingly, when they zoom in 50,000 times in an electron microscope, they discover that the red side contains extremely small particles of iron oxide, which are 40 nanometers across, 1,000 times smaller than a human hair. Rhomboidal crystalline iron oxide particles adjacent to and intimately mixed with equally small wafers of aluminum powder. And these are mixed in the proportion to each other, 25% aluminum to 75% iron oxide, to become thermite. So here we have nanoscale thermite particles which are embedded in an organic matrix of carbon, oxygen, and silicon. This would provide the gas pressure work that explosives do, and then the incendiaries together with this explosive capability of the organic carbon matrix. It makes up what is called super thermite, or as you said, nanothermite. This is a material that is so sophisticated it is made only in the most advanced defense contracting laboratories. This stuff is not made in a cave in Afghanistan, and it's found in every one of the dust samples. So what is nanothermite composite explosives doing in the dust samples? And like you say, why didn't NIST find it, given that they have so many experts in nano thermite on their staff. It appears as if they have put the fox in charge of the hen house.
It sure does. Now the towers, they came down, they disintegrated. They came more or less straight down, but if you look at the videos of the towers, they don't look as classic a controlled demolition as WTC-7 does. Nevertheless, they collapsed or disintegrated substantially into their footprints, although there were huge explosive clouds outward that have been likened to volcanic clouds. But NIST came up with some kind of an explanation for these two buildings where they, it wasn't exactly the same explanation, I guess, as their one for WTC-7, although they seem to have treated the actual evidence of demolition in the same way by ignoring it or distorting it. What was NIST's explanation for the disintegration of the two towers?
NIST tells us that the airplanes hit the towers, and we certainly agree with that. There was a large explosion of jet fuel. Most of that jet fuel burned up outside the building, 90% of it. The rest was burned up within 10 minutes, and then we have basically the jet fuel served to light fires, like lighter fluid in a charcoal barbecue. So these normal office fires then spread in the case of the North Tower. In the case of the South Tower, they actually went out and were well on their way to being completely out at about the time, 56 minutes after the South Tower was impacted, that the so-called collapse begins. The official story tells us that these massive office fires caused the trusses to sag, and that caused the perimeter columns to be pulled inward, and then they buckled due to the massive weight above them, 15 stories in the case of the North Tower. The reason this makes no sense, first of all, is in the case of the South Tower, those fires were basically out at the time of the collapse. More importantly, what we see in the videos is completely different than what's described by NIST. What we see is bands of explosions uniformly going off in the case of the North Tower, above the point of the jet plane impacts in two distinct bands, disintegrating this 15-story section in just 4 seconds. It's like a mini-controlled demolition or implosion. In the first 4 seconds, that top, the perimeter of the parapet of this building begins suddenly, smoothly, and symmetrically straight down, just like Building 7, actually, in this upper 15-story section, at 2/3 of free fall acceleration. In other words, just darn near as fast as Building 7, straight down through the path of what was the greatest resistance, the 47 massive core columns and incredible perimeter structure that's 20 times stronger than it needed to be to resist these gravity loads, because the perimeter structure is over-designed due to its need to resist 140-mile-an-hour hurricane winds. It has tremendous reserve capacity for vertical loads. So there's nothing left to drive the rest of the building down to the ground after the first 4 seconds. This building, top block, if you will, has been destroyed. So after that, what we see is an incredible disintegration of the building below it, but with this incredible explosive force, with upward, outward arching streamers, geometry almost of fireworks, all the materials being blown outside the footprint. So it's symmetrical in terms of its descent down to the ground, but it's lateral in terms of its debris, lateral ejection of debris, such that we don't even see 110 floors stacked up in a mess at the bottom of either of these towers. In fact, there's not 50. In fact, there's not 10 or 1 floor at the bottom of either of these. Each of the concrete floors has been pulverized, as we described, and we only see a 2-story pile of debris at the bottom. That's not a gravitational collapse. That's not a pancaking collapse. That's not representative of what we're told happened whatsoever. What is the incredible, equal, symmetrical distribution, the complete destruction of all of these structural components down to their isolated individual elements. And on the way down, there's these squibs or explosive isolated ejections that occur 20, 40, even 60 stories down below the so-called crush zone. These are occurring out of the building, usually in the middle of the facade, at 160 to 200 feet per second. These are propelled by explosive speeds, not by air pressure, as we're told by NIST. And we have 100 first responders witnessing orally on tape. Out of 500 total, over 100 of them are talking about sounds of explosions being experienced, being blown around inside the building, as well as witnessing at the onset of the destruction all of these explosions and seeing flashes of light throughout the building during its destruction. This is extraordinary testimony that is completely ignored by the 9/11 Commission, the FEMA report, and the NIST report. It's, again, a complete cover-up of all of this evidence of explosives, not to mention the thermite evidence in the dust that we already went over.
So NIST has not really carried out a genuine investigation into the destructions of these buildings. And I believe that Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth has called for not only has its petition for a general investigation, but you've actually called for the indictment of the directors of NIST, or some sort of criminal investigation of specific people at NIST. Have you not?
Correct. Shyam Sunder, the lead investigator of these so-called investigations, and John Gross, co-project leader, we're calling upon Eric Holder to impanel a federal grand jury investigation of them and their investigation, because this is clearly a cover-up.
Yeah, that sounds like a very important initiative to take. Now, another important recent development is that NIST released about 5 terabytes of videos and photos that it used in its bogus investigation that it essentially covered up. There's even some evidence that some of these videos were altered. And this was the result of a threat of a lawsuit by the International Center for 9/11 Studies, I believe founded by James Gurley, who may also be a member of your organization.
Yes.
So what I'm wondering is, do you think that this material that NIST has been forced to release, or for some reason released, in any case, it released it at the mere threat of a lawsuit, which is rather odd, I thought, given that it had basically declined to provide information through FOIA requests for years. But do you think that this information that NIST has released, can this help force NIST to retract its bogus reports? Is there a process, do you think, to force NIST to come clean and to reverse its lies? Is there any kind of process?
Well, there certainly is. We have submitted a request for correction, a formal process in which we cited much of this evidence and cover up on their part. We received a letter back that did not deal with the issues that we were raising, but it did curiously acknowledge that they have no idea how the Twin Towers came down. Their objective in the report was to determine how and why the Twin Towers in Building 7 collapsed. But that was their task. But they acknowledge right up front in their 10,000-page report which took $20 million in 3 years, they acknowledge right up front that they did not actually examine the structural behavior of these buildings after the initiation of collapse began. In other words, they stopped their entire investigation at the point when which everything began. That is just crucial for people to realize. Why would they have done that? Well, at the point of where the first truss begins to pull in the first column and failure, they say, ensues, global collapse commences. That's the point where all of the explosions occur and all of the evidence for controlled demolition becomes completely overwhelming. They would have had to have accounted for it. So they had to stop their investigation right there. But in this response to this request for correction that we wrote, we did hear from them that they can't explain the complete collapse of the Twin Towers. That's
so is there
extraordinary for most?
Yeah, is there a follow-up to hold their feet to the fire on this? Is there a way to follow up?
Well, we're creating public pressure. We're doing everything we can to wake up architects and engineers, congressmen. We've had Jim Himes write a letter to NIST saying, what's with all this thermite that these 1,000 architects are calling for an investigation of? And NIST writes back and says, well, we didn't test the thermite because it would have been inconclusive because there's aluminum and iron in the building. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it was that lame.
Yeah.
This is on our website, too, by the way, this documentation. It's ae911truth.org. We can also, or have written to the Office of the Inspector General, who is above the Department of Commerce, theoretically as a backup means, an ethics oversight function they have over this department, Department of Commerce, which is under the Bush administration at the time, and so we'll see.
It seems to me like progress can only come out of a larger scale investigation of the truth about 9/11, which you call for, that has criminal prosecutional capabilities, powers, and that investigation that you and your organization call for. Other organizations have been calling for this for a long time as well, and there's the concern that a new investigation could be developed, could be set up, but how do we what are the things that we need to do to make sure that a new investigation would be a genuine one and wouldn't be a cover-up like the past investigations of NIST and the 9/11 Commission were? What are the key elements in an investigation structure that would guarantee that it would not be a cover-up?
Well, what we're calling for is an investigation which is unimpeachable, and toward that, it would need to use the scientific method, like NIST did not. We would require that it would account for all of the evidence, which NIST did not. Much of that was obscured and distorted and just outright lied about and ignored. It would need to offer immunity to witnesses who would come forth under oath, so that we could get some real answers from real people who have them. So can we get all of that? I don't know. Senator Cantwell from Washington has invited us to submit a request for a formal hearing, and we've done that last week, in fact. She only did that as a result of being hounded by one of her constituents, one of our petition signers. So we don't know if that's a breakthrough, if that will really happen or not. We don't know, how Congress works behind the scenes to keep things like this from coming out. We don't know even if there is some sort of commission, that it won't be another Warren Commission. We don't know that an international body is any more capable of producing an independent, transparent investigation. There's a lot of unknowns. So somebody other than the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth is going to have to be in control of those processes.
Well, and, in the meantime, what you've gone ahead and done is your own investigation. And, Kevin Ryan made this point that in the meantime, we'll just proceed with our investigation and pursue as many lines of evidence and go down as many avenues as we can penetrate and lay out the information that we find, and get it out to the public as well as possible, and let there at least be a trial of public opinion, which there seems to be already. This already is underway, and there is a vast awareness now of many truths about 9/11 that have not been admitted to by the official agencies. So I guess we just keep carrying on with our own people's investigation, and hope that the mass just grows to a critical point, and we'll have the power to have a real official one.
Absolutely. What we have to do is build a groundswell of public outrage, a pressure upon Congress so that they feel the heat, like they did during the Vietnam War, for instance, with protests and awareness and letters and outrage from the public. And so I think that's what we're building in the 9/11 Truth movement, is a grassroots movement that will have lots of legs eventually under it, as people slowly begin to wake up to the horrible reality of what we're facing here, which is the dark implication of some sort of an inside operation called 9/11, set up from the beginning by powers that apparently have been in place for a long time to facilitate the deceptive operation on this scale. So it's going to take that kind of pressure on our public officials, on our media, before they respond. And my guess is that when the American people en masse become aware that 9/11 was an inside operation, as opposed to fundamentalist hijackers pulling this off from Afghanistan, that they'll probably throw every incumbent out of office, which would probably be a very good thing for this country.
Yeah, we clearly need to start over. I agree with you. And Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth has really been instrumental in getting this information out and raising the awareness level. And you've got a new DVD that I'm very excited about. I think it's called 9/11 Explosive Evidence Experts Speak Out, and I'm just waiting breathlessly for it to be released. When will that be?
Well, it's going to take a lot of editing work and several months for us to put that together. In the meantime, these interviews of our 45 top petition signers are being produced and put on our website one at a time. They include structural engineers, high-rise architects, metallurgists, chemists, physicists, people that have direct technical expertise in the areas of the evidence that we present. In addition, a battery of psychologists from among our petition signers go to lengths to explain why this is so difficult for the American people to wake up to. and how to facilitate that wake-up process. As well, the family members who are also signatories of AE 9/11 Truth are calling for a new investigation, expressing their support for us. So we're very excited about that project. The other project that
fantastic.
we're excited about, is this 5-minute filler piece that we will be putting on PBS TV stations throughout the country. It should reach, I don't know how many million, 9 million viewers across the country in 500 airings. So we're very excited about that. That'll be about World Trade Center Building 7, and again, by our technical experts.
Well, Richard, that's fantastic. It sounds like you're really making great strides, and your organization is really contributing. And we look forward to that DVD. And in the meantime, we'll check out your website and watch things as they go up in the interim. I'd like to thank you very much for coming on 9/11 in Context today here on Resistance Radio. We really appreciate your speaking to us, and wish you well and success in your efforts.
Thank you, Todd, so much. Great to be here with you today.